All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're looking at a huge and, let's be honest, pretty controversial transformation. It's the story of how Hamas, an organization that many Western governments call a terrorist group and that was once boycotted across the Arab world, has completely changed its position on the global stage. We're going to be breaking down the analysis of Dr. Azzam Tamimi to really get our heads around this.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's a quote from our source, and it's pretty jarring, isn't it? If you'd said just a few years ago that Hamas would be at the center of high-stakes talks involving the United States, well, it would have seemed completely impossible. This quote really nails the central paradox we're going to unpack.
So that's the big question for us today. How on earth did this happen? What chain of events, what internal dynamics pushed Hamas from being an outsider to being right at the heart of the conversation about Palestine's future?
To figure that out, we've broken this explainer down into 5 key parts. We're going to start by looking at how the world saw Hamas the day before the attack. Then, we'll peek inside the organization itself, break down the operation, look at its surprising resilience, and finally, try to make sense of the new political world we're in now.
Okay, so first, let's rewind the clock. Picture it. It's October 6th, 2023. At that moment, the world, and a lot of Palestinians for that matter, had a very clear idea of what Hamas was. But it was all, it turns out, an illusion of containment. Right before the attack, pretty much everyone thought Hamas was getting, well, more practical. They seemed to be focused on the day-to-day job of governing Gaza, right? They were easing tensions to get work permits for their people. They were letting Qatari money come in to pay government salaries. And get this, when Israel had previously gone after Islamic Jihad, Hamas just stayed out of it. The source we're looking at argues that basically everyone thought Hamas was under control, that they were contained. The whole Palestinian issue was kind of fading into the background, with things like the Abraham Accords taking center stage.
But that whole idea of containment completely missed what was bubbling under the surface. To really get what happened next, you have to understand how Hamas is structured on the inside, and it's way more complex and in some ways more democratic than you might think.
So you got to start at the beginning. Hamas grew out of the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's super important because it inherited a very specific way of doing things, a structure built around councils and voting, not some dictator calling all the shots from the top. And you can see how that process works right here. According to the source, the members actually elect what's called a Shura Council. Think of it like a parliament or a board of directors. Then, that council turns around and elects the executive leadership, the political bureau. And here's the kicker. It's not a job for life. They serve a strict 4-year term, and then there are elections again. Over time, as the movement got bigger, the structure got even more layered. They split their leadership into 3 main groups, or constituencies, one for Gaza, a separate one for the West Bank, and another for all the Palestinians living outside the territories. Each has its own local leaders, but they all answer to one global Shura Council.
Now, a system like this has some pretty obvious benefits. It lets the leadership really tailor their strategies to what's happening on the ground in Gaza versus, say, Lebanon. But the source points out a big downside. You get a lot of overlap. You might have one media office for Gaza, another for the diaspora, and yet another for the global leadership. And that can cause some serious internal headaches and slow things down.
And all of this brings us to the operation itself, which Hamas called the Al-Aqsa Flood. Now, according to the analysis we're looking at, the plan for this attack wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. It was actually an old idea brought back to life and made way, way more sophisticated. The source traces the plan all the way back to 2012. A much simpler version was supposedly drawn up by a military leader named Ahmed Jabari right before he was assassinated by Israel. After he was killed, the plan was apparently dusted off and seriously upgraded by Yahya Sinwar. And here's the really critical part, almost nobody knew about it. It was kept secret within a tiny inner circle. Even some top political leaders were reportedly in the dark about the plan and the timing. So the element of surprise was everything, but not just for Israel. The planners themselves were stunned. This quote from the source really says it all. They were shocked by just how quickly and completely Israel's defenses around Gaza just collapsed.
And that total collapse had enormous consequences. The source says the whole situation just got out of hand. The original military plan was supposedly to capture soldiers from the bases surrounding Gaza. But once the fences were down, thousands of regular Gazans just poured across. The analysis claims that it was many of these individuals, not just the trained fighters, who ended up capturing many of the civilian hostages.
So, in the aftermath,
Israel responded with a campaign of targeted assassinations going after Hamas's top leaders. In this next part, let's explore the real impact of those killings and how the organization managed to withstand them.
Let's look at two of the most significant losses here. First, Saleh al-Aruri, who was the head of the West Bank constituency. The source describes his death as a serious blow, but one the movement could ultimately recover from. But the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, that was different. He was the overall leader, the main negotiator. His death was a much bigger shock, especially because of where and when it happened, while he was an official guest of the state in Iran.
So how does an organization survive, losing its top leaders like that? Well, the analysis brings us right back to that internal structure we talked about earlier. Because it has all these independent departments and a culture of training junior people to step up, the whole system is designed to be resilient. It's built to absorb the shock of losing any one person, no matter how important.
And it's that very resilience that brings us to the absolute core paradox of where Hamas is today. It's a paradox that really gets to the heart of this whole transformation. Because even though the organization has taken massive, massive losses, its political power has, arguably, never been stronger.
I mean, look at this contradiction. On the one hand, militarily, Hamas is battered. It's lost fighters, leaders, tunnels, weapons. But on the other hand, politically, it's been elevated. It's now seen, even by its enemies, as the main group to talk to on behalf of the Palestinians, even dealing directly with the Americans.
And this political boost has led to an outcome that is just stunning. Dr. Tamimi's analysis concludes that Hamas has come out of this war as the #1 political player on the Palestinian scene. Period. It's completely overshadowed rivals like Fatah and the Palestinian Authority.
And apparently, this isn't just how the outside world sees it. The source points to a poll that suggests, even with all the unbelievable destruction and suffering in Gaza, Hamas's popularity among Palestinians has actually gone up, making it the most supported political group.
This last quote really just pulls the source's entire argument together. The idea here is that all the physical stuff that was lost, the weapons, the infrastructure, the fighters, that can all be replaced. In this analysis, what really matters is the perceived moral victory and the political power that came with it. And that is seen as way more valuable and lasting.
And so we're left with this question, which is really at the heart of this whole story. It's a deeply uncomfortable and complicated thought. Based on the analysis we've just walked through, is it possible that a military strategy that led to so much devastation could also result in achieving a massive political victory? It's a paradox that's going to define the future of the region for years to come.